Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I review books. I do the occasional singular book reviews, I do book tags, book hauls, everything bookish. You can find it here. And if you're a fan of essay length written reviews, I will put a new link where you can check out my work there, because I no longer write for Life on Books. It's on hold now because of funding and stuff like that. So if you're a fan of written reviews, you can definitely check me on A Couple of Dorks Substack. It's a Substack, so I'll put the link here. But yeah, today is going to be my March reading wrap up. I know this is getting to the end of April and I am always late. I was going to do this last week. I just felt really sick, so I could not really carry it out, and things have just been up and down, like since I mentioned getting rubbed and just recuperating. And also a shout out to a subscriber who very much sent me something to take care of myself. I'm very grateful. I've been getting better and yeah, just moving along. I even now run a small bookish business, which maybe I'll talk about by the end. If you are interested in maybe knowing about it and maybe want to support it, I can mention it maybe in another video and just give a little shout out to it. Into the main March wrap up, I finished 4 books, and the first book I finished was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly, Alderton, which I mentioned I had been rereading since September last year, but pushed over into this year because of my laziness and you know what. Yeah, so I finished this, and this is one of my favorite memoirs. It follows Alderton. She chronicles her life during the 20s, her female friendships, and how up and down, how much of a roller coaster the early 20s into her late 20s felt like. This is a collection of personal essays. It's a memoir, but you can really say it's a collection of personal essays. Has some recipes thrown in there, some very obscure abstract writing that just feel more like for fun, and they felt too much at times. The recipes and those parts, I felt they could have been cut away and maybe leaving the core essays. And if you wanted some fun essays, there are some essays on bad dates, bad Christmas Eve parties, things like that, where it's really how her friends, just how they are the center of everything for her. And I love it for that, because I love books about 20-something-year-old women. I love books about lost 20-something-year-olds. Anything like that, give it to me and you have me. If you like those kind of exploration of lost 20-something-year-olds, I will always recommend it, regardless of the little bits I did not like. I gave it 4 stars again. The next book I finished was The Belger by Sylvia Plath, and I've always wanted to read this book because it's set to be the founding novel for the depressed woman in her 20s genre, which has kind of become more popular in this decade so far. It has had a kind of resurgence with novels like My Year of Rest and Relaxation by e.t.c, Eileen by e.t.c, books like The New Me by Hailey Butler. There's a lot of books that you see with the woman displayed on the cover. This is said to be like the foundation for it somewhat. It was written in, I think, published in 1963, if I'm not mistaken, and I finally just decided to shoot for it because I always wanted to own a physical copy and I never found it, so I decided to go with my e-copy. And I did start it before I got my phone stolen, so when I got back home, I would, in the interim period while I was recuperating and all, I think I would read a chapter a day with my dad's phone, and I would read a chapter of Grapes of Wrath in the night. So that was kind of my balancing act. But yes, we follow a woman named Esther. She's 19. She has just won this prize for a fashion magazine, sort of, but it's kind of like 12 women have won the prize, a contest essentially, and they are getting this sponsorship to go to New York to do something for the magazine, while the magazine pays their trip there, pays for their stay, and just feeds them and gives them access to things that they would otherwise not have had access to. So Esther is our narrator, and she's one of the 12, and we see how as the book starts, the opening sentence, it goes something like it was the summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, and I did not know what I was doing in New York, which I feel is just a classic opening line. I love it. I still think of that line so much. And what we get is really a woman who slowly loses like touch with love for life, and we see while she's there she feels like she's floating. She does not know what she's doing there. She is not finding interest or drive or push for even the work which has been assigned to her. She's working more in the literary side of the magazine, the part I cannot really remember how that part goes, but she is working under like an agent, a publisher or something like that in the whole scheme of things, but she is very like lost. And so but what keeps her going is these little interactions she has with a girl named Doreen, who is one of the 12 and who is the only girl she's friends with, and she's very disconnected from like the other girls. And we just see progressively as she just gets more depressed as the novel progresses, because after the 1 month they have with the magazine is over, she has to go back home, I think to Boston. She's a college student, so she's a college student who got a scholarship into the university, a prestige university she attends. So she's on her summer break, and when she goes back home for this holiday to rest, she feels like she's going to die, having to stay 3 weeks in her hometown. She stays with her mother, and it's just how the depression is just progressive, and it just feels more debilitating with how Plath writes it. And it's really a look at a woman struggling with her mental health and just losing love for everything that she actually likes in her life, like from her writing, which is really the thing she likes most. She wanted to be a writer. Somehow she stops wanting that. She stops wanting to go back to school. It's just like she's falling away from the world completely. And it's really a book where nothing much happens, right? Like there are no big actions, there are no big plot points. It's really just character study, and we follow her till she eventually gets hospitalized into this mental hospital courtesy of her mother, who thinks that she is actively choosing to behave the way she's choosing, because there's a point where she says, I knew you were going to become normal again or something like that, implying that her current state is brought on by her actions and by herself, that she's actively doing what she's doing to herself. But we have this look at how like mental illness can so crush your nervous system that she cannot explain what is happening to her. It's something that you can relate to if you have gone through that kind of depression, where you are just falling out. It just feels like you are falling into a black hole, and you cannot necessarily explain what it is that is wrong with you, what is going on internally. She cannot explain it to her mother. Even the first doctor she's carried to, who gives her a shock treatment to maybe make her stable, it does not work, and she cannot explain that when she eventually gets moved to the fancy hospital, paid by the lady whose name is attached to the scholarship she has, because the lady saw so much promise in her. The lady became a famous novelist and also suffered a similar mental health issue. She can still not explain what is going on with her. So it's just that look at how crushing this mental illness drains all the life, drains all the passions from this promising young woman, if we are to quote that film title. And I enjoyed it so much. I feel Plath writes in such a way that the prose just makes up for the lack of action. Her writing just hits something inside of you. And yes, very recently there was this kind of discourse going around TikTok calling the people who glorify this work and Plath like finding a creator said she found it very odd seeing how Plath must have been racist because of how her narrator Esther speaks about people of color, which was one of the things that it's hard not to notice in the novel, where she would say something like she looked in the mirror and she felt as ugly as a Chinese person, or she felt as ugly as a yellow person, or she would describe this black person as this, she would describe somebody as ugly as an Aztec. They were just these unprovoked digs at people of color that you kind of wonder. The conversation was surrounding whether it was possible to separate the art from the artist in this case, seeing as Plath must have been writing. People try to make excuses that it was maybe writing of the time, or it was Plath of the time, and the time where she existed in, which was a very racist period in history, although it said that the civil rights movement had started coming in slowly by that time. So it's the question of if Plath was actually racist herself, and if we should celebrate her the way we do and celebrate this book the way we do, because you see a lot of young women romanticize these books like this, but this book in particular, and just like the sad girl novel and things like that. It's one of the appeals that the novel had for me to read it, because I really like that genre. I just find I'm able to relate with the characters a lot. And yes, I did think those parts, those very blatantly racist looking parts, I cannot attest to who Plath was, although it is very hard to like separate it. But my own thing was that you can call out like these parts of it and call out the writer for it without trying to make it seem like, oh, we should not praise the writer so much, when the praise is really for the art rather than anything else. And I feel people tend to take these things too far with wanting to be too woke in a sense. So it's a novel that I deeply enjoyed and that has stayed with me. Funny enough, I still think about it occasionally because of the journey we follow the narrator through, from where it's just a progressive mental health decline. It's very relatable. So I did not love it as much as everybody, I would say, but I did like it for the most part, and I gave it 4 stars. Next book I finished was The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which a lot of you have been pushing me to read for a while now, since I mentioned I owned it, and I did it 3 months. It took me 3 months, but I finished. Please ignore how my copy looks. Something always tends to happen to my copy. My copy is also a bit older, so that's the this is the effect. But yes, I'm not going to say too much about this here because I plan to do a separate review for it. But what I'm going to say is that the rumors are true. The rumors are very, very, very true, and this is most likely the novel for every other book I will read subsequently to beat in 2025. So yeah, The Grapes of Wrath, it was something serious and something special. So maybe that'll be my next video, or the next video after the next video is going to be the single review of this one. So I think I'm just going to use this. The last book I finished was Animal Farm by George Orwell, and I think I read this between March 31st and April 1st. I finished it on April 1st, but I'm counting it from March since I read most of it in March anyway. So yeah, we know it's a very short book. It's a short classic that everyone seems to have read, and I'm one of the very few people who have not read it. So yes, I'm not going to do too much with like the plot and what the book is about, since we know that already. And yeah, I know a couple of people that follow me, if not everybody, has read Animal Farm, but I think it's really a book that acts as a mirror to show us the way like human beings behave, to show us human behavior essentially. I did not know that for such a short book it was going to be so dark. I found it so dark and so bleak. It almost depresses you to see, just like seeing your race, seeing your kind, but depicted through animals, just to kind of like mask it, but it is too obvious. And I was taken with how it's a very simple writing style that Orwell uses, almost in a way that it feels very children's book-esque. I think maybe that's why I've heard high schoolers, or I don't know if it's middle schoolers, high schoolers abroad use it it's in their curriculum. So it has this very like children writing feel, but I would say a bit more advanced. And then what elevates it really is the themes and what we are shown, the portrayal, what we see through the lives of these animals, and so much symbolism. And it's how at the beginning Orwell does like this little, it feels like little droplets of like information where they kind of, even I had not heard anything about the book or what it was about or what the messaging of the story was about, to be frank, right? And so, but when I started reading it, how we see something like, and above all, no animal must ever tyrannize over its own kind. These things give you like little allusions to the kind of thing that's possible to be explored within the novel. And so then it made the novel, like, I would say predictable in a sense, but not really bad predictable, because you always waited to see what it was going to play out like when it came around, when what you were expecting to come around came around. And that was my own experience with it. And it's also with little informations, like at the beginning when they take over when they become in charge of themselves, we see how the pigs are in charge of all the animals because they are the smart ones, quote unquote, right? But then we get this, like I said, little allusions. So things like saying the pigs were the only ones who were not working, they did this for themselves, and you just see the higher stance they took. And it is just all so familiar with what happens when we have like some certain kind of movements and we have leaders in those movements. And what Orwell shows us is that every time the movement begins with a certain kind of equality, when it goes wrong, it is because certain animal I'm saying certain animals, it's because certain people in this movement decide that they want to kind of lord over everybody, or that they want to be in charge of things. And that is how movements always crumble. And it is the same exact thing we see here with how the pigs slowly decide. What they do is that they start out as making it seem like it is equal. And it's the thing with propaganda, it is what is presented, it's what things are made to seem as. And we start out thinking, oh, things are very equal, but slowly things begin to disintegrate from there. And there's so much that you could talk about, so I don't think I want to do so much here. So maybe I will do like a separate video. If you want maybe me to do a separate review, you can just tell me in the comments, because my recording time is almost out. But I just found this book, so I found myself angry because it is so familiar to human nature. We always sometimes we say one thing, then we end up doing other things, because it's almost like it is impossible for everybody to want good for everybody, or to want equality for everybody. And just the turn it takes, it's not unfamiliar, right? Or it's not unsurprising, but it is still devastating. It still hits so much. I do think I found something like with the end, like the last few pages, the last maybe 30 pages, a bit like too hurried and like wonky. That's why my score was not a perfect score. I gave it 4 stars in the end. But I do think this is a brilliant book, and I can definitely see why it is a classic and why it is as praised as it is. So I highly recommend. If you have not read Animal Farm, if you were one of those who were like me, please rush and don't walk to read it. But yeah, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, regardless of how maybe frustrating the camera quality angle might be. And I will try to maybe use this from now on, and maybe stay with this and try to make it work. But if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe. And yeah, I promise I'll be here a bit more from next week. A video will be coming very soon, so please pardon and bear with me. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.